The Senate will come to order. Senator Murphy.
Good morning, Mr. President. I impose the call of the Senate.
The Senate is under call. Senator Murphy.
Good morning, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with, and the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, if you would be so kind as to stand. And in our tradition, we always start with prayer, which is followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Today's chaplain is Pastor Sue Kesterman, Chief Executive Officer from the Churches United for the Homeless in Moorhead, Minnesota. And as I mentioned, members, following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Senators and others gathered this day, will you pray with me? Almighty and everlasting God, font of all wisdom, whose will is good and gracious, and whose law is truth, we pray that you would guide and bless our senators who are gathered for this session. Give them courage and humility to call upon you and to trust that your spirit of justice and compassion is present as a guide to all that they may undertake. Guide their debate and discernment. Open their hearts and minds to one another. Grant that they would enact laws that both please you and tend to the needs of the people they have been elected to serve. All this, and whatever else you see is needed, we ask that you would grant in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, members. The Secretary will take the roll.
Abler, Anderson, Barr, Bolden, Carlson, Champion, Coleman, Swadzinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Drazkowski, Duckworth, Diedzik, Eichhorn, Farnsworth, Fateh, Friends, Green, Grunhagen, Gustafson, Hochschild, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Jasinski, Johnson, Klein, Coran, Kroon, Kunish, Kupek, Lang, Latz, Liskey, Limmer, Lucero, Mann, Marty, Matthews, May Quaid, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell, Mohamed, Morrison, Murphy, Nelson, Hoomover, Baton, Pappas, Pa, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rasmussen, Rest, Seeberger, Utke, Weber, Wiesenberg, Westland, Westrom, Wickland, Zhang.
Members, a quorum is present. The following members intend to vote from a remote location pursuant to Rule 40.7. Senator Anderson, Senator Diedzik, and Senator Kroon. Members, if you want to follow along, I'm reading from the Senate agenda dated May 1st, 2024. Even though I do see Monday on there, it's not Monday. We know it's May 1st. So we will start with the third order of business. Messages from the House. The Secretary will read the first message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has acceded to the request of the Senate for the appointment of a conference committee consisting of 3 members of the House on the amendments adopted by the House to the following Senate file. Senate File Number 3492, a bill for an act relating to housing, amending provisions relating to residential housing leases. There has been appointed as such committee on the part of the House, Agbaje, Howard, and Myers. Senate File Number 3492 is herewith returned to the Senate. Signed, Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Members, no action is required. The Secretary will read the next message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following House files herewith transmitted. House File Numbers 4124 and 5237. Signed, Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Again, members, no action is required. Member, we will now proceed to the fourth order of business, first reading of House bills. The House files have been given their first reading and referred as indicated. Members, we will now go to the fifth order of business, reports of of committees. I'm now recognizing Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 21, I object to the reference of Senate File 5284.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. With your objection and request for a request under a motion, to re-refer it under Rule 21, that is without debate, and that will automatically happen. Members, I'm now calling on Senator Murphy for a motion to adopt the committee reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee reports printed in the agenda and the addendum be adopted, and I ask for a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion on that motion? Seeing none, the secretary will take the roll on the motion to adopt committee reports. Senator Umu verbatim for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report that Senator Dezick votes aye.
Senator Dezick votes aye. Oh, I didn't see him. Okay. Members, we're just taking a slight pause, just waiting for other remote voters to be reported.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Kroon votes no.
And Senator Kroon votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 36 ayes and 30 noes. The motion to adopt committee reports is adopted. Members, we will now go to the sixth order of business, where is the second reading of Senate bills. The secretary will read the Senate file numbers.
Senate file numbers 3887 and 4643.
The Senate files have been given their second reading. Seventh order of business, the secretary will read the House file numbers. This is the second reading of House bills.
House file numbers 4993 and 4757.
The House files have been given their second reading. We are now on the eighth order of business, introduction and first reading of Senate bills. The bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated. We are now on proceeding to the ninth order of business for motions and resolutions. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move Senate Resolution Number 7, adopted by the Senate on January 2nd, 2023, be amended as follows. We strike Senator Mitchell from all Senate committee assignments and add Senators Drazkowski and Pratt to the Committee on Rules and Administration.
The secretary will report the Senate Resolution Number 7.
Senator Pratt moves to amend Senate Resolution Number 7, adopted by the Senate on January 2nd, 2023, to be amended as follows. Strike Mitchell from all Senate committee assignments and add Drazkowski and Pratt to the Committee on Rules and Administration.
Senator Pratt, to your Senate resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Based on comments made by Senator Murphy yesterday that Senator Mitchell is no longer a member of the DFL caucus and that she has effectively been removed from all committees, this would formalize those comments. We are no longer a majority. We no longer have a true majority. We are a body of 33, 33, and 1. And so, pursuant to Rule 10.1, which states committees must be represented proportionally, I can think of no better committee to start with than that of Rules and Administration. Mr. President, I encourage a yes vote.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I will begin by saying for the third day now, we are deviating from the work of Minnesotans. I had breakfast this morning with the leaders, all four leaders and the governor. And, I should be mindful, but the speaker said in the breakfast, you're not going to negotiate your way into the majority. This week, we have had an ongoing debate about the basic rights of Minnesotans to due process, about the rights of voters to representation, about the rules of due process in this body, and now this conclusion, this false conclusion, which would again override the will of the people who voted in 2023 and delivered this DFL majority. And once more, I am watching the will of my colleagues in their efforts to override basic, fundamental values and principles of democratic governance, of due process, and the rules of this body. It is astonishing to me, frankly, that in your will to judge, that you are willing to override those basic fundamental principles of American democracy. But it is perhaps the view of the modern day Republican Party.
Point of order,
For what purpose do
President.
you rise, Senator Jaskowski?
Point of order. Senator Murphy seems to be getting off of the point of business here. We're talking about a motion brought forward by Senator Pratt, and she is talking about something about the fundamentals of democracy. I think that we're going off of the business that is before us, and I'd ask the President to bring Senator Murphy back.
And Senator Jaskowski, what rule are you referring to?
Just a moment, Mr. President, I'll find it.
I'll pause a moment because he has the floor. Senator Lucero, you can have a seat, and I'll make sure I recognize you.
Mr. President, point of order.
For what purpose do you rise, Senator Latz? And what rule?
Be a point of order or a point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
I can only entertain one point of order at a time, Senator Latz.
A point of parliamentary inquiry.
Please state your inquiry.
Mr. President, the motion that has been brought before this body purports or seeks to amend a resolution that has already been adopted. So the question is whether or not this kind of a motion is even properly before this body. That resolution was adopted, is done, and it was passed us on January 2nd, 2023. It's no longer subject to amendment, I believe, but I'm inquiring from a parliamentary standpoint whether that is the case.
And Senator Latz, you rose, and can you identify the rule that you are responding to?
Mr. President, I don't know the rule. It's a point of parliamentary inquiry as to whether there is a rule that applies in this situation. or just as a matter of other procedure.
Mr. President.
The floor is with Senator Jaskowski. Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. The rule that I'm rising to a point of order to is Rule 36.2. The member shall speak only to the question under debate and avoid personality. That's the rule that Senator Murphy is running astray from. I'd ask you to bring the member back. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, I will not rule as I did yesterday and several times. I am just going to ask the body again to always make sure that you're only making comments to what is before this body. Members, I have the utmost respect and confidence in us, and I think that sometimes when I remind you of that, then you will function accordingly. So let's make sure from now going forward that we continue to only deal with the matter that is before the body. Senator Murphy had the floor unless you are rising for some other purpose.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Please identify your inquiry.
Mr. President, I'm inquiring as to whether or not this motion is properly before us, since the resolution it purports to amend is not before us. The resolution was already adopted almost a year and a half ago, so there's no resolution to amend.
Senator Latz, give me one moment, and I'm going to look at something really quick. Thank you. Give me your patience, members. Members, after conferring with the staff and also looking at the rules, the last motion, the last point of inquiry is well taken.
Mr. President, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. President, I appeal the rule of the President.
Hold on one moment. Members, I usually don't like to give an explanation unless you're appealing the ruling, and then
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
Please state your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding is Senator Latz rose for a point of parliamentary inquiry. Can you confirm if a point of parliamentary inquiry is an item that you are to take action on?
Senator Lucero, he raised it as to the appropriateness of the motion that is before the body, and so that I will give a brief explanation as to my walking through the rules itself. Senator Pratt brought this pursuant to resolutions under Rule 6, and if you look at Rule 6.3, that first of all it is supposed to be in an appropriate form. Number two, by accepting this resolution in the form that it's in gets around the rules and doesn't necessarily adhere to the rules of 6.3. So to your question, yes, he raised it as a point of inquiry, but in that point of inquiry, he was raising a point for me to rule upon.
Mr.
Now,
President,
I will go to. Unless you have another question, then I was going to go to Senator Pratt since he's standing. Do you have another question?
Yeah, follow up, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lucero.
Yesterday, you deferred a ruling or comment citing you won't engage in hypotheticals. Senator Latz raised a parliamentary inquiry. If I just heard your response, you engaged in a hypothetical, assuming a subsequent point of order that Senator Latz may or may not have made in response to his point of parliamentary inquiry. I do not believe that the actions that you're taking and even hammering the gavel in this regard is in order. It's completely out of order. There's nothing for you to take action on or to rule on in a point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Just for clarity, Senator Lucero, I'm sure that you have a great memory, but I think that I'd like to at least add to that wonderful memory. If you recall yesterday, Senator Pratt asked me about Section 522 and asked if this was to happen, what would your ruling be? That was the question, and I responded by saying, I do not speculate, because that was a hypothetical. What Senator Latz put forward is what is before the body and what this body is dealing with in real time. So that's the difference. And so if you want further discussion, we can certainly talk offline so that we can wrestle over that interpretation of that rule.
Point
Senator
of order,
Latz,
Mr. President.
for what purpose do you rise?
Raise a point of order under Rule 6.3 that the motion before us is not in order.
Senator Latz raises a point of order under Rule 6.3, just to make it very clear and plain. Senator Pratt, are you rising in order to give me advice? Even though I ruled on it, but I still will go through the process because I think that's important. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is simply a motion to amend a previously adopted resolution. It's sitting at the Secretary's desk, and I think it's appropriate for members to be able to make that amendment. And so I would offer you to rule the motion out of not in good standing.
Haven't received advice. Senator Latz, are you standing for advice? Having Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Advice?
Please provide advice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under Rule 10.1 of Senate Rules, it states the majority and minority groups must each be represented on all standing committees of the Senate, subsequently in proportion to the numbers in the Senate. Mr. President, Rule 10.1 is not a point-in-time rule. It's not a rule that committee makeups are determined upon convening a new legislature or a new Senate body. If membership of caucus changes, it could be to deaths, it could be to special elections, resignations, it could be changes in parties. Or, such as in this case, it could be because a member is kicked out of the caucus. Rule 10.1 applies in that the committees must be proportional to the body. Because the caucus makeup has changed, we are now in this body a caucus of 33 Republicans, 33 Democrats, and 1 other. Rule 10.1 applies, and therefore the Pratt motion is in order and the Latz motion is out of order.
Senator Lucero and the body, any other advice? Members, listen, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, the issue that is before the body is not whether there's proportional number of people that are on the committee. That is not what is before this body in order for this body to deal with. What is before the body is a point of order that was raised by Senator Latz pursuant to Rule 6.3. There's one other notion that I would like for you to take into consideration even before I get to the rest of it. It is also Section 156. If you look at Section 156, because someone asked whether I could do that, it is the acceptance of motions, and I think that you should look at what is the duty of the presiding officer to accept or entertain any proper motion whenever, if it is in order. Now, after advice, conferring with the staff, the last motion, the last point of order is well taken. Senator Pratt.
Mr. President, I appeal the ruling of the President.
Senator Pratt appropriately appeals the ruling of the President.
Roll call, Mr. President.
Roll call requested, and the roll call is granted by requested by Senator Limmer. Members, we will now, let me explain. A green vote upholds the ruling of the President, and a red vote goes against the ruling of the President. Members, please vote. The Secretary will take the roll. Senator Umu verbatim for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye. Senator Jasinski for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Kroon votes no.
And Senator Kroon votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 34 ayes and 33 noes, the decision of the President is upheld. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, members, we have before us now a situation where there's 33 in the majority caucus and there's 33 in the other majority caucus. That's what we have before us today. We heard yesterday that Senator Housley asked the question. The question was to Senator Murphy, has Senator Mitchell been removed from your caucus, Senator Murphy? Senator Murphy's response was yes. So that caucus was 34 members before, Mr. President. Today it is 33. We are out of line with, we are in violation of our own rules, the way we are operating here in the Minnesota Senate. We need to correct those rules, and Senator Pratt brought a motion to do it. Apparently that wasn't a sufficient path to do it, so what we need to do then, simply in order to actually be following our rules and have our rules match what the other rules say.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Rule 10.1 was brought up, Mr. President, that we're out of
second there, Senator
proportionality right now.
Senator Latz, for what purpose do you rise?
What order of business are we under, Mr. President?
We are actually, the floor is open, and we're under motions and resolutions, and Senator Drazkowski has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I am going to bring a motion here soon, but I'm just describing the substance of the motion, Mr. President. But Rule 10.1 makes it very clear that our committees need to be proportional. That means 33 to 33 means in the Rules Committee, it should be 4 to 4 or 6 to 6. It should be an even number. And that was what Senator Pratt was trying to get to in order to bring us into compliance with our rules. And so, Mr. President, I move to suspend Senate Rules 6.3 and 10.6 for the purpose of striking Senator Mitchell from her committee assignments and adding 2 members of the Senate GOP caucus to the Committee on Rules and Administration. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary will report the Drazkowski motion.
Roll call, Mr. President.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. We will now go to the reporting of the amendment, of the motion.
Senator Drazkowski moves to suspend Senate Rules 6.3 and 10.6 for the purpose of striking Senator Mitchell from her committee assignments and adding 2 members of the Senate GOP caucus to the Committee on Rules and Administration.
Senator Klein. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, I impose call of the Senate
The Senate is now under call. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and the Sergeant of Arms be instructed to bring in absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, you've already spoken, and we already got your motion. We'll come back to you. Senator Latz.
Point of order, Mr. President.
For what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, under Section 180 of Mason's, this is out of order as a dilatory motion. Secondarily, under Section 156, the President has the inherent authority to not entertain a motion that is not properly before the body as dilatory, but it is dilatory under Section 180.
Senator Latz has risen for a point of order. Members, that is what is before the body. But just so that I can make sure that everyone is clear, even before we get to the underlying motion, in order to change the rules, or to suspend the rules, I should say, it takes 2/3 of the entire body. It is not, and that number would be 67. It is not under any other math. It will require 45 votes. So just so everyone understands, that is the underlying motion. But a point of order has been put forward, and I will take advice. Senator Drazkowski first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, this is not dilatory at all. As a matter of fact, it was Senator Latz and others that called the last motion out of order and suggested that the rules need to be suspended in order to accomplish the item of business that Senator Pratt was trying to accomplish. So, Mr. President, according to the people who moved the point of order that helped defeat the last motion, the correct way to accomplish what the objective of the last motion was is to suspend the rules. And that is the motion I am bringing, Mr. President, is exactly the motion that the movers of the point of order last time suggested needed to happen in order to accomplish it properly. There is nothing dilatory about approaching what seemed to be the consensus of the body is the right way to obtain the objective that Senator Pratt brought. And Mr. President, that's exactly what this motion does. Please consider the point of order not well taken. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lucero, advice.
Thank you, Mr. President. I urge you to rule the Latz motion not well taken. As I was listening to Senator Latz, Mr. President, he cited Mason Section 180 dilatory motions, but he lacked any substance in what he was using 180 for. He said the words dilatory motion, but there is no action that Senator Drazkowski took in his motion to suspend the rules that in any capacity is related to 180, which reads, and improperly used for the purpose of delaying or obstructing business. Senator Drazkowski is trying to conduct business in order to achieve Senate Rule 10.1 of having proportionality. That's the business that is trying to be achieved. In order to reach that end goal, there needs to be a suspension of the rules. Hence the Drazkowski motion. And for Senator Latz to make the false point or attempt that that is somehow dilatory is out of order. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Latz.
Mr. President, members, if this were a standalone motion that came in any other context, perhaps it would be in order. But what we have now is the 5th motion in the last 3 days by the minority caucus of this Senate to find some way to bring up the question of Senator Mitchell's participation as a member of this Senate, and to use it for the purposes of delay. Because we have now spent hours on this topic, because this is the 5th motion in a row.
Mr. President, point of order.
The second one today.
Hold on, Senator Latz. For what purpose do you rise?
Point of order.
Senator Lucero.
Point of order under Senate Rules 36.2. Or 36, I should say, point 1.
Doesn't apply.
I just want to make sure I go there, so I look at 36.1. 36.1, that's what you cited, correct? It says, when a member is about to speak to the Senate, the member shall rise and respectfully address Madam or Mr. President. The member may not proceed to speak further until recognized by the President. I'm not certain if that's the one that you were...
I was correct the first time, 36.2.
36.2 says the member shall speak only to the question under debate and avoid personalities. Members, as another gentle reminder, we want to stick to the matter at hand, so I'm not going to make a ruling on that. Make sure also, members, that we got the correct rules. So thank you so very much. Members, I know that this is a hot topic. I get it. And I'm trying to allow everyone to have an opportunity to speak to the question, but members, let's just make sure that we keep all of our discussions on topic and not just interrupt each other for the purpose of interrupting each other. All right? And I'm not accusing anyone of that, so I want to make sure that I'm saying that openly. This is a gentle reminder to all members. Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. President. My point is that this now 5th motion in 3 days on this related topic of the participation of Senator Mitchell as a member of the Senate in one form or another is dilatory. It is for the purpose of delaying or obstructing business. Purpose is an element of Section 180 of Mason's under dilatory motions. So my contention, Mr. President, is that the motion is not in order under Mason Section 180.
Senator Rasmussen.
Advice, Mr. President. Thank you. I would ask that you find Senator Latz's point of order not well taken. If you look at Section 180 in Mason's, it talks about obstructing business. And, Mr. President, I think all members of the Senate believe that we will be able to go through the agenda that has been outlined by Senator Murphy for the day. Business will not be obstructed if we're allowed to debate and vote on the motion that Senator Drazkowski has made. If anything, Mr. President, I would posit to you and perhaps members of the body that Senator Latz's points of order are perhaps obstructing our business here more than the motion that Senator Drazkowski has made. And I would also say, Mr. President, that Rule 10.1 is important for you to consider. This motion that is before the body is to put this body in compliance with its own rules. We now find ourselves as a Senate with 2 minority caucuses. One caucus with 33 members, another caucus with 33 members, and one member who is not a member of a caucus. And Rule 10.1 requires proportional representation on committees between caucuses. And, Mr. President, that is what Senator Drazkowski's motion is doing. We are attempting to conduct the business of the Senate, and I would ask that you find Senator Latz's point of order not well taken.
Members, I am ready to rule, unless you just feel strongly about the fact that you need to say something. I will certainly recognize you if you want to do that. But I want you to know that I am ready to rule. Senator Westrom.
Well, Mr. President, I trust you're going to rule the right way. And on the chance that you're not, Mr. President, my advice is very important to you. This is very basic. The public needs to know, and you, I think, clearly know that calling a motion to suspend the rules dilatory, tying it to motions prior in the week that aren't related to this motion in front of us, which is suspension of the rules. Mr. President, if you find this point of order well taken, there is no rules that apply in this Senate, and this place may burn down. So, Mr. President, I advise you to not find this rule of point of order well taken. This is as dilatory of a process that Senator Latz is taking to try to shut down every rule following we have in this Senate. And so I just want to advise you that this is pretty major ruling and a pretty far afield if you find this point of order well taken.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have advice for you. And I'll be honest with you, this probably is the first time I've ever used the word dilatory. And based on how it's being used here today, I figured it must mean something you don't like. But when you look at what it actually means, it means to delay, or it's being explained today as a way to obstruct. Clearly, that's not what's happened over the last few days. The Senate has still passed bills. We still have conducted the business of the people. Committees have happened. So to accuse Republicans of being obstructionist or delaying the business of the body is simply false. This is not dilatory by any means, and quite frankly, it's very relevant to what's happening here in the state of Minnesota. We've heard some lofty accusations about how we are obstructing democracy and how we are denying people representation. And then we get a motion like this, which is trying to prevent us from voting. All the logic in the arguments, Mr. President, I truly hope you do rise to the respect of the position that you hold, which you do every day, and rule correctly on this motion. And it's pretty simple, members. Take the vote. Take the vote. That's what we're here to do. There's nothing about this trying to delay the process. Let's continue to uphold the integrity of this body and not utilize certain motions to simply avoid taking votes that we would rather not take. Thank you.
Members, I am ready to rule. I did see Senator Pratt had stood, and so he's not going to, he says, and he gave me the motion that he wanted me to pass. After listening to all the advice, after also conferring with the staff, that the last point of order is not well taken. Now that you're stunned, is there any other discussion? Senator Jaskowski, I wanted to make sure that you're the last person that we hear before we go to the roll call. We've heard everything that there could be said on this issue. Now, but I do still see another great one who wants to still say something. Senator Lucero, we are now on the underlining motion. And if you could keep your comments only to that. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. My comments are to urge members to vote green to suspend the rules. Why would we suspend the rules? We want to suspend the rules to allow for a vote to uphold Senate Rule 10.1. Senate Rule 10.1, again, calls for proportionality. This chamber is equally split between two caucus, Republican and Democrat. Democrats do not have a majority. The Democrat caucus does not have a majority. The Republican caucus does not have a majority. It's 33 to 33. We must uphold Rule 10.1. And with that, Mr. President, I want to confirm, or I want to seek, if Senator Murphy would yield for a question.
Senator Murphy, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Lucero.
Thank you.
And I hope it's on the issue that is before the body. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Every word coming out of my mouth is before the issue, before the body, so have no fear. Senator Murphy, yesterday in debate, I heard you answer the question that Senator Mitchell is no longer a member of your caucus. I want to confirm that that is indeed the case.
Senator Murphy, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said yesterday, Senator Mitchell is not participating in our caucus. She is a member of this body, and she is here to vote and represent the people. So the argument that you are making, that somehow you have moved us to a 33-33 split, is, I know, hopeful on your part, but false.
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Murphy yield for another question?
Senator Murphy will not yield for another question.
Okay, Mr. President.
Senator Lucero.
Yesterday, Senator Housley asked a similar question, and the first response from Senator Murphy was what she just said in response to me, that Senator Mitchell is no longer participating in the caucus. Then Senator Housley asked a follow-up in which Senator Murphy said and made it very clear that Senator Mitchell is no longer a member of the caucus. Now today, in specific relevance to the Drazkowski motion to suspend the rules to uphold 10.1, I'm seeking to confirm. And Senator Murphy's response to me now is to deliberately ignore my question. My question, Mr. President, was and still is to confirm that Senator Mitchell is no longer a member of Senator Murphy's caucus. And her response to me just now was to deflect and to answer with the word she's no longer participating. Well, if you're no longer a member of the caucus, I understand you wouldn't be participating, but that wasn't my question. And Senator Murphy knows that the answer to confirm that question is by de facto, we need to enforce Rule 10.1. And therefore, she is now, the majority leader is refusing to yield. Refusing to yield. Mr. President, we need to vote green on the Drazkowski motion because Minnesota has watched all week long the Democrats in this chamber use and abuse rules to cling to their majority when they no longer have a majority. We need to uphold Rule 10.1.
Senator Lucero, I want to give you the guidance that you asked me for earlier, that we have to stay on what's before the body. You're now straying a little more, so I'm asking you gently. The motion before this body is to suspend, not Democrat rules, not any of those other things. I'm just asking you to argue the point of the motion to suspend.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's exactly what I'm doing. And I would submit, Mr. President, that you're being dilatory in the continued interruptions. I am trying to persuade this body to vote in favor of the Drazkowski motion.
Senator Lucero, now you know that I've been kind, but I'm not going to let you be disrespectful on the floor and not to even not to suggest my actions are dilatory. So now if we cannot have a peaceful and respectful conversation, then I will not recognize you going forward. So I'm just asking you to be careful, as I have all members. So Senator Lucero, if you stick to the business of the Senate, I will be most gracious.
Thank you, Mr. President. The motion before us is to vote to suspend the rules. The vote to suspend the rules is to bringing parity on committees. I am making these statements to persuade members to vote green to uphold Rule 10.1. Everything I've said is to that motion to suspend the rules. Republicans are trying to uphold the rules. Democrats are trying to use and abuse rules to cling to an illegitimate 34 votes. We need to uphold the rules. Minnesotans are watching. Minnesotans want to have trust in this institution. To have trust in this institution, we need to uphold the rules. To uphold the rules, we need to have a vote. In order to have a vote, we need to have an end of the games of attempting to abuse the rules to prevent a vote. Mr. President, vote green on the Drazkowski motion.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the status of Senator Murphy within her caucus, I think, is at the heart of the Drazkowski motion. It was at the heart of my motion that I believed was in order, but was such ruled. Mr. President, would Senator Murphy yield for a question?
Senator Murphy, she will yield. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Murphy, we understand both in the press and your comments here today that Senator Mitchell is no longer participating in your caucus. As I've seen it explained, she's no longer attending caucus meetings. But can you say and help us clarify her status? Is she a member of the DFL caucus, the Senate DFL caucus, or has she been expelled?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Pratt, also for your text last night. Thank you. Senator Mitchell. It is on. Can you hear me okay? All right. As I mentioned yesterday, I am not going to spend time in this chamber nor be pressed by your questions to talk about the contents of the work that we do in our caucus. That has been, as I have served in the legislature in both bodies, a time-honored practice. But time-honored practices of the legislature are being turned on their head every single day. Time-honored understandings of fundamental due process and representation are being turned on their head every day. So let me be clear, as I put out in statements, Senator Mitchell is a member of our caucus. She is not participating. We are doing all that we will do to respect the constitutional rights of Minnesotans as we continue to do our work. Thank you.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I'm still not sure I understand the answer. We understand that Senator Mitchell is not, quote unquote, participating, but it doesn't talk about her status as whether or not she is part of the Democrat caucus or if she is a caucus of one. And it makes all the difference in the world. No one is trying to negotiate their way into the majority. We have the slimmest of margins. We talked about the election of 2022 ushering in a Democrat majority into the Senate by the slimmest of margins, by one vote. By one vote in this chamber, and by only a few hundred votes in total. And Mr. President, I believe these committees should have been more proportional to begin with. And now we're not sure if we are a 34-33 body or a 33-33 and one body. And that's the point that we're trying to clarify. Because if we are a 33-33 and one, then there is no majority. There is no true majority, as I mentioned before. And to suspend the rules, to take up this motion to comply with Rule 10.1 is one that we should be taking. We are not trying to overthrow the will of the people. We're trying to stand up for the will of the people. The will of the people that made this a one-seat majority. And if suspending the rules is the right way to do that and to have that conversation and to take that vote, then we need to have the courage to stand up and take that vote. I'm disappointed that we continue to obfuscate the status of Senator Mitchell. It seemed very clear yesterday which was why I made the motion earlier today and why Senator Drazkowski. This is a very fluid situation. We get new news, we get new updates from the majority leader on a daily basis as to what is happening. And we're reacting to it. We're reacting to it because the people of Minnesota expect us to react to it. We're reacting to it because our rules tell us we should be reacting to it. And if we need to suspend the rules in order to become compliant, then members, we should do that. We should have the courage to do that. And I ask you to support the Drazkowski motion.
Members, we're going to Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate the recognition on the floor. What we're trying to do here today is simply understand our position within this body right now, based on comments that were made yesterday. Look, we saw that the words that I used at a press conference earlier this week were used as a basis for argument and made as a basis for decision making. I think words that were used yesterday were an unequivocal yes was given to when the question was asked, is Senator Mitchell no longer in your caucus? We understood that, and based on the rules that we've been asked to follow, we've been commented all week on how we need to use due process, use the rules, use those sorts of things. We'll do that. So now we've got a member within this body whose question within a caucus is really, we don't know what her status is. So, Mr. President, would Senator Mitchell please yield to a question?
Senator Mitchell, will you yield? She will yield.
No, thank you.
Oh, she will not yield. Senator Johnson.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. That's disappointing, because what I was going to ask Senator Mitchell is she or is she not caucusing with the Democrats, getting support from the Democrats in research and communications and those sorts of things? That's an important question. So now we don't know if we are 33-33 or 33-34 body. And if we're going to really follow the rules, we need to know these things. The clarity needs to be there. So now what are we doing to the people of Minnesota? Do we know that the rules are being followed here? Are we above the law? Those are questions Minnesotans should be asking right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Friends.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. I do love the work here, and every single one of us is privileged to serve in the Minnesota Senate. Mr. President, to the matter before the body, this Senate has seen Senator Osmek not participate in caucus. Didn't change the status of the members, didn't change the proportionality of the majority party. I was here in 2017, Mr. President, when then Senator Fischbach was at the same time lieutenant governor, actually went to court over her status and her ability to serve as state senator. As a lawyer, I can tell you it was clear to me she could not, but she did until the session ended. But I'm not going to get into those things. Here's what I will get into. Senator Murphy was elected majority leader of this body. She was elected by a majority of the votes. If we had 10 parties, if we had 6 parties, Senator Aaron Murphy is the majority leader. I know because I was there. I said something that happened in caucus. What Senator Murphy's statement on Senator Mitchell is that until the Senate ethics process and the criminal matter is resolved, she will not be participating in our caucus meetings. And for those of you in the minority party who have questions, that's what's happening. Will Senator Lucero yield for a question?
Senator Lucero, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lucero, 67 members of the Senate. I'm assuming we can agree on that. How many members does the DFL party have in the Senate?
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm trying to rectify 2 conflicting answers. The first answer is Senator Murphy yesterday, when asked by Senator Housley, is Senator Mitchell a member of your caucus? And her answer was no. Now she's being obstructive in her answers, deflective, and not answering. The matter before us, Mr. President and Senator Friends, the matter before us is to suspend the rules to balance committees, to have fairness. This body needs to operate under fairness, and as the answer from Senator Murphy yesterday, there are 33, 33, and 1. For that reason, Mr. President, vote green on the Drazkowski motion.
Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Lucero. I was looking for the answer. There are 34 DFL members of the Senate, but I didn't get it, and that's fine. Members, Rule 10.1 was also the subject of discussion on this floor, I think in 2017 as to proportionality. At that time, 34 GOP members chose to stick with the proportionality that the majority leader selected. It bears almost identical proportions to the committee assignments that we have here before us that were selected by the elected majority leader, Senator Aaron Murphy. I'll be voting no on the motion, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Kupek yield for a question?
Senator Kupek will not yield for a question.
Well, Mr. President, that's really disappointing. And I think in this body we have a history of yielding to members and having debate and discussion. And Mr. President, the reason I wanted to ask Senator Kupek to yield for a question is because on a local radio interview this week, which is also in the area that I represent, Senator Kupek said the following during that interview, quote, "What we did as a caucus, what we can do is we removed her from our caucus," in referring to Senator Mitchell. And so, Mr. President, I'm confused. We have Democrats one day saying that Senator Mitchell has been removed from their caucus, is no longer a member. We heard that from Leader Murphy yesterday. But today, now she's a member in the Democratic caucus when we talk about proportionality and rules related to proportionality in committees. And so Mr. President, I just want to know, what is it? We're hearing Democrats wanting to say, oh, we've distanced ourselves from Senator Mitchell, we've removed her from caucus. But when it comes to maintaining control in the Minnesota Senate, maintaining control on committees, they are perfectly happy to have Senator Mitchell as a member of their caucus so that they can have 34 votes on the floor and also have majorities in committees. And so, Mr. President, I'm just disappointed that we hear members of this body saying one thing and then changing their mind, saying something else, and are unwilling to even yield to questions on this floor about members of their own caucus.
Senator Eric.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. We absolutely should be voting green on the Drazkowski motion to suspend the rules so that we can take up the action needed so that we're meeting our own rules, as was already suggested. And it was just suggested moments ago that because Senator Mitchell is a Democrat, your caucus maintains the majority. Members, Mr. President, Minnesota already has experience in this area. In the other body, a couple of sessions ago, there were 4 members of the Republican Party that broke away from the House Republican caucus. They still considered themselves Republican, but they were a separate caucus. They were given separate staff. They were given separate ratios within the committees. But they were still Republicans. There were 2 Republican caucuses in that chamber. If we are to believe, Mr. President, what we heard on this floor yesterday and what was represented in that interview on the radio, Senator Mitchell can remain a Democrat, but we would have 2 separate Democrat caucuses here in this chamber. And they should be represented separately in those ratios on the committees. And that's what Senator Drazkowski's motion to suspend the rules is hoping to get us at, that we will be following our own rules based on that. Minnesota has a history. We know what this means, and this is absolutely what the Senate should be doing today to get us in order with our own rules. Vote yes on the Drazkowski motion.
Members, the last voice that we're going to hear will be that of Senator Drazkowski. I want to remind the body what business is before you. Senator Jaskowski has a motion to suspend the rules. And in order to do that, it requires 2/3 of the Senate. That number would be 45. That is the number, is 45. Senator Jaskowski. Members, I thought I did say that the last voice that we were going to hear and before anyone else stood, because I looked to that side in particular, and he was not there ready to go, but I'm going to do it now. But let's just be clear. I've tried to be as thoughtful as possible. So Senator Westrom, and then we're going to Senator Jaskowski. Anyone else before we go to Senator Westrom and then Senator Jaskowski? Because I don't want anyone pointing at another member at the last minute. Okay, Senator Westrom.
Well, Mr. President, I was standing the whole time you were telling us that Jaskowski was going to be your last pick, and then you went to Senator Jaskowski. So I don't know how much longer I needed to be standing, but I'll give you some forbearance on that, just so you know how long I was standing. Mr. President, I rise because we've had members now not want to answer on the floor, and I want to urge members to vote in favor of this motion to suspend the rules, but remind this body that when a member is not part of a caucus, they become another caucus or their own caucus. I represent a district since I was first in the legislature that had Senator Charlie Berg in it, a member of this body. He was a long-standing member of the Democrat caucus, but the year I was first elected, Senator Charlie Berg was ousted from his party caucus and became his own caucus. And I remember it because he was my senator. So working together on bills, you'd have to go to his office, which the Democrats gave him separate space. Senator Roger Moe at the time. He was officed in the basement of the state office building, right off of ground floor, right off of the tunnel. That's where his office was. He had his own independent staff, separate from any other caucus. And members, that's what we're talking about. But Senator Charlie Berg was not counted as part of the Democrat caucus to make up some rules and then excluded when they didn't want him. He was his own caucus when he's not part of the caucus, which we heard yesterday. And so, members, we've had this history in our Senate not that long ago. Senator Charlie Berg is a clear example of how it happens when you have more than 2 caucuses in this body. I urge you to vote green on this motion.
Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would Senator Kupek yield for a question?
Senator Kupek will not yield for a question.
Senator Kupek won't yield. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the question I was going to ask Senator Kupek, and maybe other people should ask Senator Kupek at a time when he will yield, is Senator Mitchell a member of your caucus or not? And that's the heart of the debate that we've been having around this motion, is what is the truth? We're trying to find the truth, and we're trying to act on the truth to bring our rules in compliance with what we are being told is the truth. We've heard that Senator Mitchell is simply removed from some of the discussions in caucus. We have heard yesterday from the discussion that Senator Housley had with her that she was removed. The question Senator Murphy asked, was she removed? That means she was there and now she's not there. Was she removed from your caucus? It was a clear, one-word, unequivocal yes. So we were also told, Mr. President, that Senator Mitchell has been removed from committees. Well, I was just on the Senate website, Mr. President. Senator Mitchell, for all of Minnesota to see, is still on the committees on the Senate website, which is controlled by the majority. So another message that is different from what the public is being told and what is actually acting out. As Senator Pratt said, that the lines are being blurred and obfuscated in this whole thing, depending on what the majority or the old majority believes is best for them at the time, whether it's in the eyes of the public and how they are responding. They're trying to make it look like they're responding to what the public is saying, or whether it's their need to maintain full-throttled power, which is what we are hearing today. There's one truth for the public to hear and one truth when it's time to maintain power. That's what we are hearing, and that's what we have dissected from this conversation. The majority, depending on what their objective is, the old majority, I should say, Mr. President, depending on what their objective is, want to have their cake and eat it too. And the people of Minnesota don't want that. They want to hear the unequivocal truth from this body being spoken, whether it's being presented on a website, whether it's being presented in a news release, whether it's being presented on the Senate floor in debate around how we get our rules to match what is being said. So, Mr. President, this motion will bring our rules in line with what we are being told is the truth. And what we are being told as of yesterday, and I couldn't hear Senator Murphy real well today. I didn't hear anything that conflicted with what she said to Senator Housley yesterday when Senator Housley asked her if Senator Mitchell has been removed from the committee. The answer was yes. So if that's the case, there are two majorities here in the Minnesota Senate, 33 to 33. We need to make the Rules Committee 6-6. And we need to remove Senator Mitchell from the website, remove her LA and the other benefits that come along with caucus membership, the way that we are being told, so that the people of Minnesota can see, Mr. President, that this body is truly acting the way that the old majority leader says it is acting. I encourage your support of the motion. Members, thank you, Mr. President.
Members, the secretary take the roll. Remember that it requires 2/3 of the Senate, and that would be number 40. You need 45 to suspend the rules. Members, please vote. Senator Umu Verbatim, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report that Senator Dietzick votes no.
Senator Dietzick votes no. Members, you cannot have conversation at the desk while we're in the midst of a vote. Just a kind and gentle reminder. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Cruen votes aye.
And Senator Cruen votes aye. All members having voted who desire to vote, the Secretary close the roll. There being 33 ayes and 34 noes, the motion to suspend the rules, which requires 45 votes, does not prevail. Members, we are on motions and resolutions. We will adopt the author's motions as one motion. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate File 5468 be withdrawn from the Committee on Capital Investment and returned to its author, which is me.
Senator Dornick moves that Senate File number 5468 be withdrawn from the Committee on Capital Investments and returned to the author. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, Senate resolutions numbers 96 and 97 will be referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. No action is required. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Murphy to designate special orders.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bills be made special orders for immediate consideration. Members, the list is on your desk.
Members, that is correct. The special orders list dated May 1st, 2024 is on your desk. We will begin with Senate File number 3881, Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. And today, Mr. President, I have the distinguished honor of talking about former Senator David Tomassoni. Senator Tomassoni was born on December 5th, 1952 in the city of Bemidji, although he did grow up in Chisholm, so we won't hold the Bemidji thing against him. After high school, he attended college in Denver. Following that, he played hockey, professional hockey in Italy for 16 years. In addition to that, he was actually on the Italian hockey, Olympic hockey team in 1984. After his hockey career, Senator Tomassoni returned to Chisholm, where he and his wife raised their young family. He was elected to the legislature, served 8 years in the other body, and served over 20 years in this body. In that time, he served as chair of multiple committees and as president of the Senate. And most importantly, Mr. President, he left an enduring mark on this body before he died of ALS on August 11th, 2022. So we're here to name a section of Highway 169 after him, and I want to give a little bit of a background on that section of highway so that we know why that's an important section to name after him. Back in the 1950s, there was a deal that was made where the decision was made to have Interstate 35 go up to Duluth. It originally was supposed to go up through the range cities. And as part of that deal, they decided to have a 4-lane highway between the east and west ends of the Iron Range. That's come to be known as the Cross Range Expressway. There was 2 purposes for that. It was to improve access across the region and to improve safety. And the project has kind of grown in spurts over the years. Most recently, Senator Tomassoni was able to secure the funding to complete a section near the city of Taconite. And that's the section, starting with that section, going all the way to the city of Mountain Iron, that we have decided to name in Senator Tomassoni's honor, because that was the section of the Cross Range Express that he still represented when he was in office before redistricting changed the lines. And that's about all I want to say right now. I want to get to the good part, the part that I've been waiting for all week, Mr. President, which is to hear on third reading all of the stories that the colleagues of Senator Tomassoni have to tell. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hochschild.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Farnsworth, for leading the way on this bill for the range delegation. Senator David Tomassoni was one of a kind, and I know many of you had the opportunity to serve with him, but there are very few humans that you meet in life that have the charisma that David had. Anyone who had the opportunity to meet him felt that charisma and were brought in to the warmth that he brought into this world. And I think that's really something that we all could live up to. You know, you hear stories, and I know I hear stories since joining this body, of the meat and cheese parties that he would have in his office, oftentimes Italian meats and cheeses, bringing folks in from both parties to have conversations, separating out the politics and just sitting down and getting to know each other. I think those opportunities seem to be fleeting these days. But David really brought that to our institution, and I'd love to see that continue into our modern day. I think there's a lot that we can all learn from Senator Tomassoni's style, and I can say myself, I had the opportunity for some mentorship from him before he died up north. And hearing from him, hearing his stories, his guidance, getting his policy and political recommendations was something that I will always remember. I've also had the opportunity to make a family connection with his son, Dante. Our kids go to daycare together. We live in our community together in Hermantown, and I appreciate that friendship and hearing the stories of their father and all the great things that he did. I want to mention one of the phrases that I know Senator Tomassoni often stated, and many other range delegation members, and that's our state seal term of le tout du nord, meaning bring the money north. And that's something that I feel I have brought to the state Senate. The focus on making sure that northern Minnesota communities are supported and that we're bringing as much money to our communities as we can. He was not shy about that, and nor should we be. I deeply wish I had the opportunity to serve with David, and I'm jealous of those of you that did have the opportunity. So I hope we can recognize what he did both for his region and northern Minnesota as well as our state. And I just appreciate this opportunity to recognize him. And thanks again to Senator Farnsworth and other range delegation members for supporting this.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise as in a couple of capacities. One, of course, is the representative of the Transportation Committee. We were very proud to be able to hear this bill and pass it through and pass it to the floor. And we had a really special moment remembering Senator Tomassoni, a fellow member. People don't know my name. My first name is actually David, so I was part of the David Caucus, and I was proud to be a part of the David Caucus. And just remembering him as a friend and as a very, very able and capable legislator, and someone which I'm sure has already been said and will be said many times, someone who really was able to be everyone's friend, regardless of where he stood in terms of party, wherever he stood on the issues. David and I agreed on many, many things and worked together on behalf of working people in basic issues of justice and fairness. We disagreed on a lot of things too, around issues of resource extraction and environment, and we would go at it from time to time, right here on the floor, on those environmental bills. David always, every single time we had our back and forth, would come up to me and slap me on the back and have a good laugh and say, we're good, right? Everything's great. And of course it was, because I respected him tremendously, and the positions he took and the values he had in advocating for what he believed was right on behalf of the people of his district. And I know he respected me as well. It bears repeating, he was fun and extremely funny and charming. Had an incredibly interesting way, of course, of passing a bill. We call it the Tomassoni mumble technique. So he would just run through a bill really fast and mumble. We couldn't hear a word he was saying, and sit down and say, it's a good bill, vote for it. One of his good friends at his funeral eulogized him by talking about his legislative achievements and accomplishments. And of course, I'm a policy nerd, as folks know. I'm not a super transactional politician. I believe in the money. The money is, source of resource and effort on behalf of our constituents, not usually my focus. There's a long list of his achievements, and then it all got tallied up at the end, and I don't remember how much it was, but David had something in it. He was very proud of having something in every bill, and I can tell you, as the chair of transportation, he always had something in my bill. And sometimes he was bugging me about the Cross-Range Expressway. Probably his crowning achievement, of course, was to build that US 53 bridge over the mine, now called the Tom Rukavina Bridge, which is the tallest bridge in the state of Minnesota. Not quite the most expensive. That was, of course, the 35W bridge, but it came very close. I think it was about $220 million. And David did that. He got that bridge wedged into my bill, and they got that bridge built. So thank you, Senator Farnsworth. Thank you, Senator Hochschild. This is a great tribute to have the Cross Range Expressway named after Senator David J. Tomassoni. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussions before I go back to Senator Farnsworth? Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is such a great day, one I've been waiting for. I could go on and on for hours. We've had a long day already. I don't want to go too long, but there's so many great memories I've had with Senator Tomassoni. My very first day on this floor, sitting where Senator Carlson was in front of Senator Carlson. Senator Tomassoni sat in front of me. We hit it off from day one. I think it was shortly into our first month. Senator Tomassoni said, "Hey, you want to go out and grab a bite to eat after session?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be great." And I, at that time, shared an apartment with Senator Lang and went back to change. And I said, "I'm going out to have dinner with Senator Tomassoni." And he said, "Are we allowed to do that?" It was the other party, so his true words, and I hope he gets up and says a few things about him as well, because we've got to know him well. But Senator Tomassoni was such a great guy. As Senator Hochschild made great comments about, what happened, and I know Senator Hoffman will as well. Oftentimes would he invite us in for cheese or whatever, crackers, or all the different things that he had in his refrigerator there. And we had such a great time getting to know each other. It's something that I think is true to this institution. You have to have relationships. You have to have relationships to discuss policy. Sometimes you agree on policy, sometimes you don't. And I think those relationships and learning what the other side is. Why do they vote the way they do? Why do they feel certain about a certain issue? If you can understand the other side, it is so important. And Senator Tomassoni was the king of that. He would love to debate and talk about things, and sometimes it would get pretty heated. But as Senator Dibble said, it would always come back to you were always good with each other because you knew you had that relationship. You knew you could disagree. You knew you could agree. So many great things. Another, I only have about two more memories I'll go on to. One was I went to his 60th surprise birthday party. And I was the only Republican who showed up there. And we were at Tom and Jerry's in Chisholm. And word got around pretty quickly that I was there, and people were discussing, and they couldn't believe that I came to that surprise party. And I tell you what, I met some great people. I met Tommy Rukavina, and it was great to have those conversations. Jerry Janicek, got to know him very well, and so many other people that Senator Tomassoni introduced me to. So from that point on, every time I was in northern Minnesota, I would visit Senator Tomassoni, or he would visit me at the location that I was staying at, a friend's house on the lake, Vermilion, and so we had a great time. The last other fun bonding trip that we had together, we were in the Iron Range and we were touring, and I was riding with Senator Tomassoni because of his district. So when you're in your district, you usually drive your own car so you can catch up and do things like that. You don't take the bus. So I rode with Senator Tomassoni from location to location. And at one point, I had to break off and go back to the bus and get a couple emails off and do a few things. So Senator Newman jumped in the car with Senator Tomassoni. And they decided they were going to go ahead and miss one stop and meet the mayor at the next place before the tour. So they were in a little bit of a hurry, and it was a brand new highway up there that Senator Tomassoni probably got funded at one point in his career. And the bus was going by, and all of a sudden we saw a car pulled over on the side of the road. It was Senator Tomassoni. He got pulled over by the police for speeding. And listening to the story later, he decided somebody was going too slow and he wanted to get around them, so he went out and passed. Well, he passed an unmarked cop car, police officer car. So the first words when the police officer came up to Senator Tomassoni's window was, "Well, the unmarked car thing works." I guess Senator Tomassoni didn't know it was a police officer. So lots of great stories like that. Just a great guy. He's something that we should, or something and about him is something we should all want. and that's to do better for Minnesota, work together, get things done, represent your district in the best way you can, and be nice. And that is Senator David Tomassoni. Every place I went in his district with him, people knew him, come up to him. He was just a phenomenal person. And by the time he would come to my district, many, many times, people in my district knew who he was, and they would come up and say hello to him because they knew him. So I'm going to turn to Senator Hoffman because I know he's got so many great things. I got to know Senator Hoffman through Senator Tomassoni. We've become good friends, and I think it's just great to have those relationships, as I said, across the aisle. So thank you, Senator Tomassoni. This highway is for you.
We're going to go to Senator Hoffman, and then we're going to go to third reading, and then we're going to end with Senator Farnsworth, who will ask us to do a moment of silence. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. President, thank you. In true David Tomassoni tradition, we should not bring this bill up as its by itself bill, but rather it should be an amendment added to some other kind of bill, because we knew the king of amendments was Senior David Tomassoni. And like the good Senator Jasinski was talking about, David, on the way to a CSG convention, had to make a point to stop and see you for lunch. We were on a timeline. And Tomassoni said, hey, I hope you're okay this afternoon. We're going to stop and see jazz. I mean, that was his whole being was about, I hope you're okay with this. We're going to go do something. And it was absolutely fun, Mr. President. But let's talk about some of the things David brought to us, right? Famous. He checked Wayne Gretzky. It was the difference between allowing the Canadians to score on the Italians or not, and it was the defenseman between Gretzky and the goalie, and usually when Gretzky was against the goalie, Gretzky won. David checked him out, took him out. They did not score a goal, right? The other thing that he did is he scored against Phil Housley. I wish Senator Housley was in here because Tomassoni was known to score against Senator Housley's husband. And you know, Frangelico, that was just a dessert for him. Not that we would violate any rules in the Minnesota Senate, especially back in the days when you'd have to get on the third floor when he had his office back there. And I ain't beefing David, so don't worry about that. But the password to get into his office was more money for the range, to the good senator from Hermantown's comment, and that was that. The Tomassoni Golf Rule Book, Mr. President, it was as thick as a Minnesota statute book. It was gigantic. The Tomassoni Rule Book, for example, one was you had the rule of you could move your ball a golf club's length, right? But in the Tomassoni Rule Book, the golf club was actually the length of that water club, so it would be stretched out 20 feet, and that was the length that you could do on that, right? It was pretty thick. But I think the one thing that people don't realize, David Tomassoni saved people's lives. He did. And I'm not just talking hypothetical. Senator Mattson was choking one night on a famous beef sandwich or something with choking. It was something, right? Tomassoni did the Heimlich maneuver on him. In the papers the next day, they actually credited David Tomassoni for doing that. But you know what, Mr. President, in all sincerity, his integrity, his compassion, and his leadership qualities made him that respected figure that he had in both his district and the state of Minnesota. And it's so great to see that Highway 7, which has a song named after it, many discussions about Highway 7 and 69 with David Tomassoni. This is a great way to really say thank you, David. And with that, I say thank you.
The Secretary will give Senate File 3881 its third reading.
Senate File number 3881, a bill for an act relating to transportation, designating a portion of marked U.S. Highway 169 between Marble and Mountain Iron as Senator David J. Tomassoni Memorial Cross Range Expressway.
Third reading, Senator Farnsworth.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. So I have the privilege of filling the seat that was filled by Senator Tomassoni for so many years, and of course they That's a big challenge. Many in this body knew Senator Tomassoni better than I did, and I learned that actually today. I was on the House's website. I was looking for some old footage of Senator Tomassoni, and I happened to come across something from 1998, and I saw the bill that he presented, and then the immediate bill after that was Senator Rest. And I'm like, wow, there's people in here that served with Senator Tomassoni in the 1990s. And so I've been thinking about what I can say to honor him, and I didn't know what words there were, and then I remembered some words that somebody else told me about Senator Tomassoni. Back in early 2022, when his illness was getting bad and he announced that he was not going to run for re-election, and I started to think about running, I went to one of my former teachers. I actually ran into her, Mrs. Charter. She was my former English teacher, and she was best of friends with Senator Tomassoni, and I told her about my plans, that I was thinking about running, and she grabbed my hands and she looked intently in my eyes and she said, Robert, David is a giant. You will have some big shoes to fill, kiddo. She still calls me kiddo. And then she added, always put the range first and do what's right, because that's what David always did. And that's so true. Whether it was Senator Tomassoni fighting for the mines in northern Minnesota, whether it was the way he treated people on the street or at the grocery store with such dignity, or whether it's the way he handled his illness with such dignity, he always did what was right. So I'm glad that we can honor him in this way by naming this section of highway after him. And I've been told that there is a way, every time he presented a bill, there were some final words that he would say before the vote came. So in honor of Senator Tomassoni, members, this is a good bill. Vote green.
With that being said, before we go to the vote, it's my understanding that you want to do a moment of silence now. Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought we were going to do that after the vote, but we certainly could do it. We could do it now. The Tomassoni family wasn't able to make it today. They will be coming down tomorrow for the signing with the governor. But we thought normally in these instances we recess so that we can honor the family. But since they're not here, we thought that it would be a good idea to have a moment of silence to think about Senator Tomassoni's legacy and maybe say a silent prayer for the family.
So we'll vote first, and then we'll do the moment of silence. I've been advised that that's the best way to do it. So with that being said, the secretary will take the roll on final passage of Senate File 3881. Please vote, and then we'll do our moment of silence. Senator Umu verbatim. For those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Cruen votes aye.
Senator Cruen votes aye. All members having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. The secretary will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 0 noes, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, if you kindly stand for the moment of silence, please. As requested by the author and all the others who are here in the chambers, we ask that you take a moment out of respect for David Tomassoni and his great work. And if you have any other personal memories of him, this would be a good time to celebrate him or someone else who does great work that you know of. So So the moment of silence. Thank you, members. Continued on special orders, we'll now go to House File 4310, Senator Mohamed.
Thank you, Mr. President. House File 4310 is a bill to ratify the compensation plans from the Subcommittee on Employee Relations. It is our job as a legislature to review and ratify these contracts as part of our obligation to state employees. This bill ratifies the Commissioner's Plan, Managerial Plan, MNsure Compensation Plan, and the Minnesota State Administrator's Personal Plan. Those are the unrepresented state employees. This includes increases in salaries and merit-based increases for our incredible state workers. Ratifying these contracts is crucial to making sure we are attracting and retaining the best and most high qualified employees for our state. Thank you.
Any other discussions on House File 4310? Any other discussions? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 4310, a bill for an act relating to state government ratifying certain compensation plans.
Third reading. Any other discussion on House File 4310? Any final words? Oh, Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the author yield?
Senator Mohamed, she will yield. Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mohamed, could you outline the percentage increases that are made available to state workers in this bill, both including the cost of living adjustments and the step increases? And could you tell us for the approximately half of the workers included in here that get step increases, what their total increase over the biennium would be as a percentage?
Senator Mohamed.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Jaskowski. The MMB plans a 5.5 increase in salaries effective July 1st, 2023, and 4.5% increase on July 1st, 2024. Annual merit-based increases generally of 3.5% on average. About half of the covered employees are eligible for these increases. The Minnesota State Colleges and Universities Personnel Plan for administrators covers 590 unrepresented administrators, and the plan includes 2.5 merit increase effective both on July 1st this year and July 1st, 2024 next year. A continuous merit-based increases from a pool of 2.5%. For this year and next year, and approximately 85% of employees are eligible.
Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Mohamed. Members, you heard the numbers. The cost of living adjustments, 10% increase over 2 years. Now, we need to ask ourselves, is this equivalent to what's happening in the private sector? The people who are working hard every day to pay for the big government that we have here in the state of Minnesota. Our huge government has gotten to be as big as it is, Mr. President, because of the profligate spending that this body and the one across the street has done over and over again. We're seeing it here as well. The 10% doesn't include the increases for about half of the population of the workers included in here, Mr. President. The merit adjustments that they get, the step increases, bring it up to, I'm told, between 17 and 18% increase for about half of the population of people covered by these contracts. 17 to 18% increase in 2 years. So the people of Minnesota that are working hard every day, driving a truck or cutting hair or preparing taxes for people, or painting buildings, need to ask, as this body and the one across the street continues to tax and tax and tax and take their money, why are we giving it away so easily? We've done it in bill after bill after bill. here is another one where government is being treated one way while the people of Minnesota are struggling to pay their bills. Mr. President, I encourage a no vote on the bill. Thank you for yielding, Senator Mohamed. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage of House File 4310. Senator Umu Verbatim, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye. Members, please vote. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Kroon votes no.
And Senator Kroon votes no. All senators having voted who desires a vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 36 ayes and 29 noes. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, we will now go to House File 3438. Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, this bill is focused on ending the pervasive use of junk fees by requiring advertising that includes the upfront all-in price that reflects the actual cost that consumers will pay for goods or services. Junk fees hurt consumers, responsible businesses, and they distort Minnesota's market for goods and services. This bill will make our markets fairer for consumers and more competitive for small businesses by providing price transparency and competition. If, in the last few years, you've booked a rental car, bought a ticket to a hockey game, reserved a hotel room, or eaten at a restaurant, the odds are that you've paid a junk fee. 85% of Minnesotans report encountering junk fees, where you see the price next to the item isn't even close to the price that you end up paying. When you go out for a nice dinner or order delivery online, what fees are added when you go to pay your bill? An average Minnesotan family pays $3,200 in junk fees per year. As Representative Greenman and I have been working on this bill, we've been collecting receipts from Minnesotans across the state, and it will amaze you how pervasive these junk fees have become. Convenience fees, wellness fees, resort fee, servicing fee, processing fee, connection fee, facility fee, and a new one that we just found last week, an inflation fee. Call them what you want. These junk fees are just another example of ways that corporations use anti-competitive practices to raise costs and squeeze all of us out. As this practice spreads across our economy, it's time to do something about it. This bill prohibits junk fees by adding into Minnesota's Deceptive Practices Act a subdivision prohibiting sellers from advertising or displaying prices for goods or services that do not include all mandatory fees or surcharges. I want to thank all the industry experts, business advocates, state and national leaders who helped us, who provided input to help us craft this bill so it's functional. But mostly I want to thank Minnesota consumers for their input into this bill because they are the ones who ultimately pay the tab. Minnesotans are being nickeled and dimed with these extra fees. With this bill, we can end that. It's a consumer-friendly, market-based policy that all of us should be able to vote for. Price transparency is a common-sense solution that is good for Minnesotans and good for fair markets. I hope you'll join me in voting green.
Any other discussion on House File 3438? Seeing none, the Secretary will give House File 3438 its third reading.
House File Number 3438, a bill for an act relating to consumer protection, defining deceptive trade practices to include the failure to disclose mandatory fees in advertising.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we go to roll call? Excuse me. Before we go to vote on final passage. Who? Okay. Senator Rustrom.
Mr. President, wondering if Senator Port would yield for a question.
Senator Port, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Port, just to try to understand the bill better, will this affect like Airbnb that people have commonly gotten into renting, so there's cleaning fees and other fees? Do they just have to be listed, or will they just be now aggregated into a total price and you won't know what fees you're all paying? If you could explain that so we have better understanding of those types of situations.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. It depends on if the fee is mandatory or if it is an upgrade you can choose. If you are renting an Airbnb and you want the swimming pool heated or you want the hot tub heated, those often incur extra costs. If it is something that is mandatory that just comes with every single rental, no matter what, then it needs to be included in the all upfront pricing. They can list it out if they want at that first spot, but it needs to be visible the very first time they see a price.
Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port, if you'd continue to yield.
Will you yield? She will yield. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Port, so I think it sounds like the platform could decide how they want to display it, but your bill would just require that it shows a total, and then coupled with that question, Senator Port, if you can just clarify that part of it. But have you worked with online platforms? How are they receiving this bill? Is it something they think is easy and going to work, or is it going to frustrate the e-commerce? I think your idea is conceptually well here, but I just want to make sure we're not having some unintended consequences or some situations that we haven't thought through. So how have they been receiving your bill, and what's their responses been?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Westrom. I've worked diligently with many online sellers, including Airbnb, DoorDash, StubHub, and more, to make sure that this bill is actually not just good for consumers, but it is functional in practice, and that it is able to be implemented across industries. Actually, during the work on this bill this session, we've seen DoorDash implement many of the changes already. So they're able to do these. We have worked to ensure that the language fits the needs that the online sellers have come to us to make sure that they fully understand and can comply. And at this point, I think we are in as close to peace in the valley situation as we can get here with the Senate version.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering if Senator Port would yield for a question.
Senator Port, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. President. So with that explanation, if I'm understanding this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I went and I bought, I don't know, I go and I buy a new appliance, the price of the appliance and then any delivery charges, as long as it's up front before I swipe the credit card or sign a purchase agreement, here's what we're going to charge for delivery by the mile, by the hour, any combination thereof. But there's, you know, it also in the bill, it also has taxes imposed, government entities, sale, purchase, receipts, delivery of goods, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, if we're going to list out everything that a seller would charge, whether it's a delivery charge, and I really kind of enjoyed the last one you mentioned, the inflation tax. fuel surcharges, different things like this. If those are all actually listed ahead of time, why are we exempting the government from listing all of the fees that we impose on the consumer through the seller?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make clear that things like delivery fees and mileage fees are spelled out in detail, because in many cases those are both either a choice that you make, am I having this delivered or am I taking this home? It could depend on multiple things, so those are laid out in the bill depending on if it's by mileage, if it's a flat rate, things like that. There are different options there. And for the taxes and fees, it is, just like we charge sales tax, allowable to, continue to allow businesses to charge government-imposed taxes and fees. So we know some districts have an entertainment district tax that might be higher. Those are all still allowable under this bill.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would you yield for one more question, please?
Senator Port said she will yield. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I come from the transportation industry, and as fuel costs go up and down vary, we don't adjust the rate, we adjust a fuel surcharge. And that is usually adjusted on a weekly basis based on national averages or regional averages, depending on the contract between the transportation company and the shipper, or whoever's paying the shipping bill, shipper, receiver. Would those transportation costs still be, the fuel surcharge costs still be allowed to be listed separately, or would they be forced to be included in the costs? Or would they be would we have to change the overall contract for shipping rates, or would we still be able to allow a purchase or a separate on the fuel surcharge that would vary week to week?
Senator Port to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Barr. This is in a section of law that directly works on consumer facing sales. It is not governed by business to business. So if you were working with directly to a consumer, you may have to put that up front.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the fuel surcharge is actually charged usually consumer to consumer. In some cases, like where we're thinking of here, or where the Senator Port had mentioned, was like a shipper to receiver kind of thing, warehouse to warehouse, or manufacturer to warehouse. But FedEx, UPS, when they deliver the packages to your house, that's all included. There's a line on there for fuel surcharge. I've had packages delivered many times that have a fuel surcharge delivered on there. Or Amazon has another charge they've been putting on there that we started in this chamber, where delivery charge in Minnesota. So there are some of those charges, and if they can't charge them, how are they just going to have to raise rates to compensate and make the best guess on what fuel will cost? And the goods and services they'll have to bump the prices previous to any fuel surcharge increases or cost increases, as opposed to allowing for things like a fuel surcharge increase based on a weekly basis. As fuel goes up and down, that's going to leave your cheapest cost for your consumers. So as written, I would recommend there should be some changes on this, or so a no vote until we bring a little more clarity to some of those. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minnesotans are very concerned about inflation. They go to the grocery store, they go to the gas station, and they see that the same goods and services are costing them more day after day. And I think we see, in some cases, businesses responding to that inflationary pressure that they feel by trying to use junk fees to pass along those costs to consumers. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about this bill, that unfortunately, this bill isn't going to solve the inflation pressure that we see that's being caused by politicians in Washington who have led our country down a path where we currently have a national debt of $34 trillion. And that inflation junk fee is being paid by every Minnesotan. And I think, unfortunately, Mr. President, last session, we also saw some junk fees coming out of this legislature when we increased taxes by $10 billion, including a delivery fee that Minnesotans have to pay every day. And so I'm glad that we are talking about the concern that Minnesotans have with their dollar going less far than it used to every single day, every single month. But until we can get government spending under control, those inflationary pressures aren't going to cease, unfortunately. With that being said, Mr. President, I do want to say that I really do appreciate the work that the bill author has done to listen to different affected parties in this bill and to make sure that it takes into account the unique business models that some industries have. I want to point out in particular, I appreciate the bill author including language that would avoid duplicative pricing disclosures. So for businesses who are already required in other parts of state or federal law to disclose their prices in a certain way, or that their prices are actually reviewed by regulators, they would not have to comply with the duplicative framework in this bill. And so, Mr. President, I do appreciate the work that Senator Port has done on this and the continued conversations that she's been willing to have with members of this body on how to make sure that this bill, if it does become law, actually works and is something that Minnesota businesses can implement, and at the end of the day will result in more transparent prices for consumers so that they know when they walk into a store, they know when they're shopping online, the actual cost that they're going to end up paying for their goods. And so I think the conversation on this bill will continue, and I just appreciate again, Mr. President, the bill author's openness to different changes to make sure that this policy works if implemented. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm wondering if Senator Port would yield for a question.
Senator Port, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Port, I am very receptive to some language you used in your opening remarks in regards to price transparency. I very much value transparency to help empower the consumer to make decisions with what they may or may not be doing in terms of wanting to incur an expense in a transaction. My question is, I've been trying to read this bill as fast as I can. There are several different sections that things that do apply, don't apply. My question, Mr. President and Senator Port, is would this bill apply to the medical industry, whether it be clinics or any type of transactions that occur in the medical profession?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lucero, my understanding is that those practices are governed under another section of law, and it would not govern those portions, unfortunately.
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, and that's unfortunate. I was trying to read this, and the only thing I can see potentially is line 3.4 that says it's under the section the subdivision does not apply to. I guess line 2.29 says any industry where federal or state law regulates pricing disclosures. I don't have a medical background. I don't know if the clinics or hospitals, if they're governed with pricing disclosures. That's the reason why I was asking. I don't know if they would qualify under line 2.29. I then see line 2.30 is dealing with real estate. Line 3.1 deals with any business or affiliate governed by the PUC or the Federal Communications Commission, so obviously medicine isn't in there. So the only other one would be line 3.4, any industry where prices are regulated by a governmental authority or corporate brand. Not knowing the medical industry enough, I don't know if their prices are regulated, quote unquote, but to the larger point, it deeply frustrates me, and I know it deeply frustrates many Minnesotans across the state, of not understanding the prices of services in the medical field. So when it comes to a non-urgent, non-life-threatening circumstance where one is going in and performing a series of services, I really hate when I get this bill afterwards, and it's multiple hundreds of dollars or multiple thousands of dollars that I wasn't expecting. And I potentially would have made a different decision in a series of optional or elective blood tests or, you know, whatever the circumstance might be. I would have chose something different, or at a minimum, allowed me to price shop, allowed me to competitively price shop. So while it may not be in this bill, I certainly hope that there are future conversations that we can have to ensure price transparency in the medical field. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gruenhagen. Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I echo some of the thoughts of what's been said. At the high level on the bill, I think all of us want price transparency. If you've purchased an airline ticket, even though I don't think this covers it, you know, where you appear to reserve a space, but oh, if you wanted a seat, if you want, it's going to cost you extra. Would you carry clothes? Do you want to wear clothes? There's an extra fee that's buried. But I know this bill has also gone through a variety of changes from the House. And I just want to check on a couple particular issues. So would Senator Port yield for a question?
Senator Port will yield for a question. Senator Coran.
Senator Port, in the bill or in the House in the dialogue was a lot of fees that have been added on to consumer receipts as it relates to local sales taxes, municipal fees, especially the most recent taxes, transportation taxes as it relates to a county or a city. St. Paul just added another sales tax. There's also embedded in those traditionally, if you pay with the credit card, there's a surcharge for credit card. Are all of those fees still allowed to be under this bill? Because I can't tell. Are all those fees still allowed to be itemized on a receipt for a consumer?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Coran. Yes.
Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Port, because I'm concerned that as these fees grow, that transparency needs to remain in effect. And I know the credit card piece of it is an issue that many have put it on their menu as an option, but they would never be able to determine the exact price to be able to embed that based on their order. So I appreciate that is at least protected at this point, and I hope it stays that way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Port just yield for a quick question?
Senator Port will yield for a question. Senator Pratt. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port, we've seen at some establishments, particularly in Minneapolis, is where I've noticed it most, when local government, when state government imposes a new mandate and cost, they're itemizing that on the receipt. Would that be included in this bill, that they would then have to build that into the base price rather than being able to itemize it on their receipt?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, and Senator Pratt. If it is a directly state-mandated tax or fee as defined by statute, such as a sales tax, the delivery fee would fall into that as well. It could be itemized, would not fall under this bill. If it is something that is more broadly required to do business in the state of Minnesota, such as requiring paid family medical leave or paying minimum wage, those are the costs of doing business, the cost of having labor in our state, and those, just like all of the small businesses do across our state, have to be built into the price. This is where the real price transparency and lack of competition comes in. Those are still costs that are being incurred. They are being passed on to consumers, but some businesses are hiding them after the transaction has been completed, really, and the consumer doesn't have any idea that they're going to be paying for that, and they would have no reasonable way of expecting to pay for that. I don't go out to eat and expect that I am going to have something on my receipt that says this is for my server's dental insurance. That's the cost of doing business. It's the cost of having labor. So those fees would not be allowed to be exist under this bill.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would Senator Port yield for one more question?
Senator Port, will you yield for one more question? She will yield for another question. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port, if let's say like the credit card fee that Senator Karam brought up, they were to disclose that on a sign say at the point of entry or at the point of sale, would that suffice as proper notice?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's already disclosure of a credit card fee if using a credit card was passed into law a few years ago. This bill does not consider that to be a mandatory fee if the establishment also takes cash. If the consumer has a choice on whether they're choosing to pay with a credit card or cash, that is not a mandatory fee. If the establishment only accepts credit cards, then it would need to be included in the price of the item.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Port. Mr. President, we're talking about price transparency. And what I see is that oftentimes proprietors will include additional costs to highlight the fact that this is not a part of them providing a product. This is a part of the labor mandates, the state mandates, the local mandates that have been put on them that raise their cost. For example, I may buy a cup of coffee in Shakopee and pay $5. And I may go to Minneapolis and pay $5, but there's a $1 health and wellness fee that's been tacked on because the local government has added that into or onto that business. And in protest, they want to highlight to customers that we are being forced to charge you this. It's not a part of our actual price. It's not a part of our actual being able to provide you this good or service. It's being foisted upon you by your local government, by your state government. And to me, it becomes a little bit of a First Amendment right of free expression. And by forcing, under the guise of transparency, by forcing these fees to be included in the price of a good or service, takes away that ability for differentiation, takes away that ability to tell consumers, this is why you're being charged this amount. And so, Mr. President, I'm actually concerned that while we're pushing for price transparency, we're actually having the opposite effect. Thank you.
Members, any other questions or discussion before I go to the author for final words before we vote on final passage? Seeing none, Senator Port for final words.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this bill will level the playing field between big corporations and local businesses. It will ensure transparent pricing so consumers can make informed decisions about how they spend their hard-earned money. And it will bring us one step closer to an economy that works for everyone, businesses, workers, and consumers alike. Please vote green.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage of House File 3438. Members, please vote. Senator Umu Verbatim, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report that Senator Deceptive votes aye.
Senator Deceptive votes aye.
And Senator Frentz votes aye.
And Senator Frentz votes aye. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Kroon votes no.
Senator Kroon votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 41 ayes and 24 noes. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, we'll now proceed to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interests. Any announcements of Senate interests? Without objection, the following senators will be excused from today's session. Liskey from 1240 to the end, Duckworth from 1245 to the end. Any other announcements of Senate interests? I see you pointing at someone. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to reiterate what happened today on the floor with the motions. Look, I was given a letter on Saturday night from the Senate Majority Leader removing Senator Mitchell from committees. And I did not sign that letter. But the press release from the DFL went out that she had been removed from the committees and she was no longer caucusing, giving Minnesotans the impression that she was removed from her duties here and no longer caucusing. Now, what we did today was simply an effort to address that, to show that we are following the rules of the Senate. We asked Senator Murphy yesterday, and she confirmed that she was no longer in the caucus, so that's what we did. We tried to remove Senator Mitchell, which I'm happy to do, from her committee assignments, but then also rebalance those committees in order to give us equal representation under the rules. I think what we saw here today was a pure and simple political power move. We're no longer following the rules of our Senate, but we have made things up. So now what are we doing? I'm very discouraged by the actions taken here today on the floor, the votes that were made, and I hope we can do better. And members, I hope tomorrow will be a better day. Thank you.
Any other announcements of Senate interests? Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate do now adjourn until Thursday, May 2nd at 11 a.m.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Senate is now adjourned.